What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Joe's Geek Show, the video series where we talk about all things geek culture. From comics to movies to games, anime and manga, you name it, we discuss. And today with me, I have DarkKnightNation once again returning to the channel for a nice discussion on the current state of The Flash. So how this is going to go down is we've broken this down into a few different segments. Primarily, we're going to talk a little bit about the writer himself, Joshua Williamson, what he's been doing on the book. We're going to then go into maybe a few of the story arcs and give overall just a consensus and idea as well as thoughts and opinions on what we think about the current Flash run. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dark Knight Nations, who's going to introduce himself, his channel, and then let's go ahead and get this party started. So over to you, man.
Hey, man. Well, of course, thank you so much for having me on, talk a little bit of comic book goodness. For those of you guys watching, hi. I run the channel Dark Knight Nation, and we like to do a lot of story discussions, dissections, character analysis, the occasional review, but we really just like to dive deep into the things that we love about comics and go into the different sources of media that comic book stories have been adapted into. Somebody yesterday actually had a conversation with Ryan from Nerdy Blurb TV, just about, I guess how I'm like the surgeon of comic books. I just like to rip it apart and take a look. So if that interests you, please feel free to come check my channel out. You'll definitely see Joseph's face slewn throughout my little library of videos. So definitely feel free to stop on by, and we'll be doing back and forths for hopefully a good while to come.
All right, right on. So again, yep, that is Dark Knight Nation. Definitely highly recommend his content. And yeah, Surgeon is probably a really good way to describe your channel for sure, because like the amount of detail that you go into on your comic book reviews is absolutely awesome. I mean, me myself, I'm definitely more of a superficial, not so much reviewer, I would call it. I just like to give broad overviews and then kind of say I like it or I don't like it kind of deal, with only once in a while maybe touching into more in-depth analysis on comic books. But so as I had said, we are going to be talking about the current run of The Flash, including Joshua Williamson, the writer himself. So Joshua Williamson, he has been the writer of The Flash since Rebirth started. So from that very first issue, #1, back when Rebirth kicked in, what was it, like in 2016, 2017? Something like that?
2016. I believe it was summer 2016.
Yeah, summer 2016, because when I was still living in Texas, there was actually a launch party for it. So, I mean, it was a whole slew. It was lots of fun. Really enjoyed that. Big release. Rebirth was a huge, huge thing. And of course, I have always been such a big Flash fan, but I kind of missed my time to jump on the New 52, so I decided to jump on into Rebirth because I was overly excited to finally be able to collect a Flash book from scratch. So, like I said, Williamson has been on the book since the very first issue all the way up to current. He has planned the entire series out. And yeah, I mean, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I have actually rather enjoyed what he's been doing within the book. I know that Dark Knight, you have some different opinions on that, but just to cover some storylines that he's done. So he started Rebirth out with the Godspeed story arc, where he introduced a new speedster villain, and then he transitioned that out into kind of this whole slew of stuff from the time covering things like the negative Speed Force with the Reverse Flash. He did a story arc with Gorilla Grodd getting the Flash's powers from the Speed Force. Then he, of course, most currently, he's been doing, just actually wrapped up the Forest Quest, and then there's the crossover right now going on with Batman, which is The Price. But I have not read those issues because the thing is, I don't collect Batman anymore. So when I opened up the Flash 64 and saw that it was part 2 of a story, I was like, well, now I got to go and get the other books. But yeah, that's just a broad overview of what's kind of been going on story arc wise in the Flash. And then Now, I guess we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about each one. So, Dark Knight, if you'd like to continue this out.
So yeah, Joshua Williamson. As far as I'm aware, The Flash was really his first outing into superhero comics. He's done a lot of independent work. Did Nailbiter for Vertigo, I believe, and that's how his relationship with with DC Comics started. The great thing about DC Rebirth when it started was it all springboarded off of Jeff Johns, right? Who has a history of generally being great at knowing the characters of the DCU, but has proven on multiple occasions that he knows the Flash through Justice League and obviously his own Flash run.
Flashpoint.
So yeah, when Jeff Johns pretty much initiated DC Rebirth, it was very Flash centric, very Flash heavy. So you know from the get-go he was kind of going to be dipping his fingers throughout the Flash storyline, and I think that was reflected. The Godspeed arc, the Rebirth stuff that was intertwined with that in Batman, you know, the beginning of DC Rebirth, I think it was great. I really enjoyed it. It goes to show that Jeff Johns was involved, because if you ask me, it might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory. I think Jeff Johns might have had a hand in plotting the button crossover between Batman and Flash. But for me, Williamson really started to drop off after that. I think after the button, for me, was when I really started to see a decline in quality. I started to see a decline in attentiveness, you know, by the writer, by editorial, by the artists. I think that one of the things for me that I'll start off right away being a jackass is that I don't like that generally the Flash artist changes almost every other issue or every 2 issues. I think it's incredibly distracting, especially when you have multiple artists in the same story arc, because you would think that through the story arc, atmospherically, it's supposed to look the same. It's supposed to feel the same, right? And if it doesn't, it kind of disrupts the experience for me. And sometimes we will get artists that are very similar, sometimes vastly different. You know, you go from guys like Gianna Menico and Howard Porter to guys like Christian Duce and Scott Collins and so on and so forth. And now Rafa Sandoval. It doesn't feel very concise to me. And one of the things, I'm going to get this off my chest now, the length of Iris's hair changes every issue, and it pisses me off. It will go from like Dixie cut to like shoulder length to down to her back. And it's simple, very simple things like that show me that either the artist isn't paying attention or the editor isn't paying attention, or some combination of the two. I don't know about you, but that bugs the crap out of me.
Yeah, so I definitely understand what you were saying about the change in the artist every few issues. I do agree with you on that. It does get a little frustrating sometimes because you do see those key visual differences, in between each comic issue. And it can be a little exhausting because, it's almost like I spy with my little eye, or it's kind of like, one of these things is not like the other sort of deal going on. And, I'll be honest, it doesn't bug me quite as much, just simply because, again, I don't really dive into like the details of it. My first and foremost thing is, does the story entertain me? That's the first thing I pay attention to. Am I entertained when I'm reading this story? And I know you were saying that Williamson's is kind of been, he kind of dipped off after the button for you. And I'll admit that the Godspeed story arc started off really strong. That was a really strong story arc in the very beginning, especially coming off of Rebirth. One of the best things I loved about that Rebirth issue was the re-inclusion of Wally West into the DC universe. Wally West proper, not the New 52 Wally, who was later renamed into Wallace West just to differentiate between the two. I thought that was such a good move on Rebirth to have Wally West sort of be the focal point into everything sort of just changing back into that more hopeful DC universe that everyone's been wanting. And I know this isn't a Heroes in Crisis video, but goddamn, I, I can't even with that one right now. That is just absolutely. I can't even keep a straight face when talking about Heroes in Crisis and Wally West. I mean, if you read Heroes in Crisis or have been paying attention to it, you know what happened, and you're like me when you're just like, if that's what they were gonna do, then what was the point of bringing him back? However, that's kind of Tom King's fault for the most part. It's his story. He does what he does. But yeah, when it comes to Joshua Williamson's run, again, I felt that the Godspeed story arc was a really strong start. And as he went on, I did like a lot of the stories that he told. I really enjoyed the story of the negative Speed Force when the Reverse Flash, he transferred, his negative Speed Force powers into Barry, and then we got to see, Barry try to cope with that and stuff like that, because I thought it was really interesting, because it seems that the overall arcing theme of Williamson's Flash run, to me at least, seems to be starting over, again, becoming a student of the Speed Force, learning things about it that you previously did not know, because, either you just didn't experience that side of the Speed Force, or, it's just, someone does something you just never thought of. And yeah, I mean, the most recent one into, I know, the Force Quest, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but even with the Force Quest, I really liked the inclusion of, the idea of also the different kind of forces out there, and like the Strength Force, Sage Force, and so on. And it does, I think, help expand the lore just a little bit. And again, like, I will admit, I know you've said this on multiple occasions. I'll let you talk about this in a little bit too, when we turn it back over to you. But yeah, I mean, I will admit, it does kind of seem a little bit Jeff Johns like with the different Lantern Corps. But for what he's doing with it, it's entertaining enough for me. And I honestly don't mind it so much. Actually, I'm rather enjoying that part of the story.
It's difficult for me because naturally, I'm just a very critical absorb. When I absorb media, I'm naturally very critical. So if I'm able to pick out problems or see issues with something immediately, that deters me, frankly, from being entertained by the book. It's so derivative of Jeff Johns, and I think moving forward from like the button, it's just been him trying to recreate Jeff Johns, and he can't do it. If you want to do things right, make subtle nods, obviously, right? Like, this all takes place in the continuity. Make subtle nods to what happened before. But Jesus, man, it's just overtly being mentioned all the time. We're recycling plot threads, but frankly, executing them not quite as well as the first time. It's very, very, very clear that Williamson is passionate about this, and that he loves the Flash and he loves comics. But man, like, pardon the joke, but he needs to slow down. He doesn't resolve plot points ever. He opens up all these different things and never resolves them fully. And I think that, again, he needs to slow down, take the time. If you want to start opening up branches and different pathways for you to go with your big overarching narrative, fine. But some things cannot wait 50 issues to be resolved. I'm sorry. Comic books is a periodical medium. People don't read for a 10-year arc. You need to know when too long is, or when it's long enough, I should say. Because you have guys, for example, one of the things I love, and I'm a huge critic of Metal, one of the things I love about the beginning of Metal, however, is that it rewarded me for having read The Court of Owls, right? I didn't need to have read The Court of Owls to enjoy that portion of Metal, but because I did, it elevated the story for me. I didn't feel like I needed to read something from 5-6 years ago to get what's going on. And it always feels like that with Williamson's Flash, especially from, I'd say, the second, well, I guess if he plans on doing the 105 issue thing like Tom King, from about 20-something issues onward, it's just been feeling like that all the time. Not to mention, for as much as Williamson and Snyder are collaborating between, the Flash's forces and the Justice League's forces, or the new forces, they're muddying the waters because they're naming a bunch of different forces for the 7 in Justice League, but also they include the Still Force, which is also one of the forces in the Flash. But the Strength Force and the Sage Force aren't being talked about in Justice League. So are they not on the same list, but simultaneously are on the same list? It doesn't make sense. There's not a lot of editorial consistency, and reading both books, frankly, gets confusing and a little bit annoying. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's editorial, the writers, probably some combination of the two, but it's kind of frustrating, and it feels like a bit of a mess. Again, I know Williamson loves the Flash, and I know he loves the universe he's playing in, but it's just not executing well for me anymore. In the beginning, I can totally agree. I loved the Flash, the first maybe 20-something issues or so.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first books I read every other week when it came out. I loved it. I had a blast. We were expanding on the Flash mythology without being derivative of something else. The Speed Force Storm, sure, it was crazy and out there, but Williamson at the time was able to tie it into a lot of different things that he sets into motion and make it feel cohesive. Whereas now it's just like, man, I think you open the floodgates and you don't know how to close them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always take things like, any links between comic books on a case-by-case basis. Like, I know that the Still Force has been mentioned in Justice League there. I think it was, like, Gorilla Grodd who had it for a little while in the book there. And then, but I wasn't sure if I myself, too, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think that the other forces were meant to be really included in Justice League, and they were meant to be more just kept within, the Flash book itself. At least that's how I was understanding it.
Well, the thing about that, though, is that it feels lazy, either lazy or just out of their hands, because the Still Force, right, is either there is an overarching category to these forces, which contain the stuff that's mentioned in Justice League and what's mentioned in the Flash, because both of them have mentioned and utilized the Still Force.
Right.
Which would logically leave us as readers to conclude that, okay, the Strength Force and the Sage Force must also be included in Justice League because the Still Force is. So they're not really giving you much to move off of, and it's not making a lot of sense because they're expanding on all these forces in Justice League that don't quite add up, right? Like we had like the Tier of Extinction,
right?
We had the Ultraviolet Corps, and as far as I'm aware, I honestly don't quite remember what the force was in Drowned Earth. Like they referred to the Tier of Extinction, but it seems like it's something kind of isolated from a force in particular. It's too much, man. Between Williamson and Snyder, Justice League and Flash, it feels like they're trying really hard to evoke this Golden Age, Silver Age storytelling, and it's not being executed well. Those styles of writing aren't used anymore because they're outdated. You can find ways to homage without trying to directly utilize those storytelling techniques, right? Like comic books have grown past what they were in the Golden Age and Silver Age, right? Like the whole purpose of me doing what I'm doing on my channel is to make the point that comics should be looked at as another medium and should be judged and analyzed the same way that film is, right? Or that prose is, or poetry. It's a form of storytelling.
Yeah.
Just like any other. I don't think it should be kind of it shouldn't be, oh well, they did it back then, so like we'll do it now. It's just not feeling right. It doesn't feel appropriate to me.
Yeah, I mean, and I get what you're saying. I mean, it is possible that at one point, maybe Snyder was talking to Williamson. They were like, hey, maybe we could, like, interconnect the stories in some way because this big cosmic thing happening in Justice League, we'll include this Still Force, but then, after the introduction of Still Force into Justice League, it is quite possible that then afterwards they decided to backtrack it because, it hasn't shown up again since that initial introduction, which is a little jarring. I will admit that, perhaps it was they decided that, maybe this stuff is better kept in Flash, especially with especially since at the end of the Force Quest, when they pretty much told you, sort of the idea that all these forces are actually, like, they're all enemies of each other, and there's going to be like this big war that's coming that's alluded to, which is, I mean, I still think it's a fairly interesting concept. I will admit that, I wish that the introduction to the forces were definitely done a little bit better. I thought that, the characters that gained the force powers from throughout the, the line of introducing the different forces, that was a little, I thought that was a little weird the way it was done, because, you got one character who's like, just a vigilante sort of person who could still be a murderer. You got some villains. It's really weird because the forces do seem to like to choose villain characters as their vessels. But even so, to go back to another point you were talking about with Williamson not wrapping up storylines and stuff like that. I mean, I personally, I didn't feel like that. I thought he, whenever he set out for a storyline, he, wrapped it up for the most part. So I wasn't sure what you meant by that specifically, because, like, when I think back to, say, when Gorilla Grodd got the Speed Force powers, I mean, that was resolved. Or when the Reverse Flash came back and took Iris to the future, that also got resolved. And, there were definitely some olive branches that came off of it and kind of, went into the book to continue on. But I felt like the storylines themselves were wrapped up. I mean, even the most recent one where you had the Gemini characters chasing after the Flash to try to get his powers, and then one was eventually killed and the other one locked up in Arkham, no longer with their powers.
So part of it is definitely to do with, I think Flash War was a huge spawn of it. There's too much going on, and everybody's trying to dip their toes into, like, the Flash characters, It's fine that we have, like, the three Flashes currently off on their own doing different things, but it just doesn't feel progressive, or at least naturally progressive. So, first off, we're letting Wally go off and die, right, at Sanctuary. Firstly, why is Barry letting Wally go off when clearly he has some very unresolved issues? Like, frankly, I think part of the reason that it feels like there are so many different plot threads going by is because, and I'm going to say this now, I don't think Joshua Williamson knows how to write Barry Allen. I don't think he understands Barry's voice. I don't think he understands him as a character. He's letting his essentially his surrogate son go off on his own in an incredibly unstable mental capacity,
right?
To look for his children that don't currently exist. Frankly, it's negligent. Barry Allen was very much like, we're going by the rules. We're doing it this way. I'm doing what I feel is right no matter what. And it just feels so... It feels like he doesn't really care. And then the next second, Williamson doesn't give you a reason, and he suddenly cares, like, out of context. Like, we're not playing with logical, like, plot progression to get to point B, right? We're getting to point B when Williamson wants us to get there, and there's no reason as to how we got there. And that's also indicative of how, like, Barry solves his crimes. Like, I was just rereading this run, and a lot of the time it's like, For example, in the previous arc where the Flash is fighting Heatwave, and Heatwave now has the Sage Force.
Right.
He's doing his detective work. He's just like, something doesn't feel right. And then I quote, he says, if Heatwave kills a young version of himself in his mind, he'll be gone for good. I have to save him. I have to. How did we get there? How do you know this? Because the only shred of evidence, or the only thing that we have leading up into that is, this just doesn't feel right. Okay, so because it feels right, you automatically go to the correct conclusion. It doesn't feel like detective work. Like Williamson's not writing Flash as a detective, even though every other issue he reminds us that the Flash is a detective. Mm-hmm. We're not logically getting from point A to point B. I get you don't need to fill me in on every step of the way, but man, there's no indication of how we're getting there. It's just Flash solves the problem because he's a detective, right? That's like we're led to believe that that's supposedly the logical pathway for Flash to go. And I think it's kind of lazy, the storytelling there. Like, if you choose to write a character who is a detective, then write him as a detective. I always preach, write your stories for the characters. Do not write characters for your stories. They already exist. There's a fundamental groundwork that's already been laid for them. Flash, in his case, Barry Allen has been around for, what has it been, 50 years?
Right about, yeah. He's been around for a minute.
So where are we going with this? I hate when it's always the just because the plot demands it kind of thing. I need to have some inkling, whether it be explicitly stated, implied, maybe even in the background in the artwork. There's just not a lot of cohesion there in the direction of the storytelling for me. And again, it's indicative of how he writes Barry and how there's no evidence for him to conclude anything that he solves.
Yeah, so when it comes to stuff like that, see, the way I was understanding it, because he did put in a few throughout from the introduction of the Force Quest, and even a little bit before that, from the time they got the Sage Force going, he did have a few throwaway lines here and there about how, because the forces are connected in some way, he gets feelings every now and again. So I think that's kind of where he was going, where, Barry was just kind of getting that feeling because of the connection between, all the different forces, where, okay, if Mick does this, then he's gone forever kind of deal. So maybe it was just sort of like, that's the way I was understanding it, where it was just sort of an interconnected, vibration or something that gave him, sort of like, some kind of knowledge or something that he doesn't know how to quite tap into or something like that. Again, that's I do agree with you that it could be explained a little bit better in that regard. Just because, if you are a person that's going to think about it a little bit harder, it's not going to make too much sense. But, for me, it did it enough where I didn't really question it too much. But, you definitely bring up some good points there.
Yeah, frankly, it just it feels kind of weak to me. It's just, so because there's some sort of feedback going, now that all of these forces are out in the world and being within a certain proximity of each other, he just kind of knows. Like, if you're going to do something like that, to me, again, I'm not a comic book writer, but it would feel logical to maybe it gives Barry this instinct, and the instinct leads him in the right direction, but instincts shouldn't give you the right answer immediately. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you're doing something so procedural, like a cop case, a detective story.
Yeah.
It feels like weak storytelling, and frankly, I don't know if Williamson is just trying and failing, or if he's lazy. And if he's trying and failing, fine. I guess you're trying, but there's no way for me to tell indefinitely. It doesn't. There are a lot too with like the relationships between the characters that just don't feel super warranted. 1 second, Barry has that romance with
Mina
at the beginning at the beginning of the arc, and it's like, okay, cool. Right. Like, he sees a lot of himself in her or whatever. She dies. But his romance with Iris begins to bud again, and then she comes back and he's ready to throw Iris away for her. So what now? Iris is forgive my French, but now Iris is the side bitch.
The other woman. We'll say the other woman.
He's doing it because his plot demands it, right? Like when they brought Mina back as evil dark Speed Force Mina, we need to drive home that there's an emotional connection between these characters. Like I know we were just telling you that Barry and Iris are stronger than ever, but now we'll ship Mina and Barry. It makes Barry feel like a teenager. I haven't read an issue of Flash where it really felt like Barry knew what he was doing. I know that we're treading new waters and going into new territory with all these different forces, but like he already has this new area to explore. We should no longer take the things that he should know and have him question them, because we already have a lot of other things to work on over here, right? It doesn't make any sense. And again, it feels it feels like he didn't really read the New 52 Flash, because the New 52 Flash was Barry trying to learn how to use the Speed Force, right?
Right.
And in the Flash Quest, he talks about being like a student again. There's nothing in this run that's been evident that he was ever once a master, so he's just been the student the whole time, it feels like. It doesn't feel
which in the Force Quest he does, say that, I have been a student this whole time, when he recounts all of the experiences that he's had up to that point.
I don't know. There's literally I was reading it today, and there was literally a panel where he's like, now after all this, I have to be the student again. When were you ever not a student? Because this entire run feels like you don't know what the Speed Force is. It just, it just doesn't feel cohesive to me. To be frank, I'm pretty ready for somebody else to hop on the book. I'd like a fresh voice. It all feels very same to me. I'm kind of tired of it. I literally let 10 issues of Flash go by without reading it because I was just so tired of reading it.
Oh, well, that's just sad. I'm sorry for your loss, sir.
And the villains sometimes just feel like they have these very childish motivations. Again, it feels like he's really trying to harp on that Silver Age, Golden Age storytelling, but there's a reason we're not in the Silver Age or the Golden Age anymore. These techniques have evolved. Comic books have become a medium that have been recognized as art.
Okay, so now that you've gotten some things off your chest about some of the things that you really haven't cared for about The Flash, some things I've agreed, some things I've kind of disagreed on, but what are some of the instances and things that you like about the book?
Well, for me, a lot of them were probably in the first couple arcs of The Flash. I think that there are a lot of things, honestly, that Williamson did in the beginning of his Flash Rebirth run that he hasn't been able to recreate. I loved how in the first arc he subtly, no, I don't even think it was subtle, he nods to Jeff Johns' run, right? Nods to the relationship between Barry and Eobard Thawne and how Eobard has impacted his life and his career as the Flash. Now, versus now it feels like he's poking at it a little bit too hard. He's really prodding it. Okay, you've said it. Let's move on. He did a great job at the beginning of the arc conveying the emotions that are tied with their backstory, the tragedy, the loss, the obsession in Eobard Thawne's case. I liked when Williamson kind of played with a little bit more of their relationship, right? And how they had kind of met before Eobard Thawne ruined his life.
Okay, yeah, I know. I remember what story you're talking about on there.
That little retcon about how Eobard is just plain obsessed. We know, if you've been reading Flash for a decent amount of time, Flash is Eobard Thawne is obsessed. And Williamson does this really great thing about making that kind of outdated Reverse Flash origin kind of twisted and psychotic, it's scary. Whereas the whole I idolized you, you didn't acknowledge me trope, you could have just been kind of like well and dandy and whatever, quote unquote comic book storytelling. But he kind of makes it scary, right? Like this guy's sick, twisted, and like because I didn't give him the time of day, he literally ruined my life and is trying to ruin my life again. And being as capable as Eobard Thawne is, it's a reality, right? Like he has the potential to actually do this. These are not empty threats. So that was one of the things that I really, really enjoyed in the beginning with Eobard and Barry, and he does a great job of leading into that, right? Like from literally Flash Rebirth issue 1, as Barry is going around doing his thing as the Flash, he sees these little kind of like Speed Force mirages of Eobard Thawne, and those correlate with things that kind of resemble some parts of his past that Eobard is involved in, which I thought was really great. It was subtle. It was just well done. It was like a well-seasoned piece of meat. You know what I mean? They threw us a bone. They let us chew on it a little bit, and then we got that arc with Reverse Flash. You know, like I said, I think that the beginning of his run was very, very strong.
Oh yeah, and I will say that the Eobard Thawne stuff is probably easily for at least for me, my favorite section about his run, from the time where he hit him back in the button, and then Eobard came back just one more time for that storyline where he took Iris into the future, and the storyline and like the issues that were leading up to that moment right there. I just remember it was just before he took Iris into the future, or within that same issue. Just showed how sadistic and evil he really is, and how he has just this warped, twisted perspective. Like, it was, I remember the scene where he went to go get Iris, and it was Wallace West, the New 52 version of Wally, who was there. And Eobard Thawne just laid the smackdown, and I remember panel by panel of just, you know, the sounds of like the bones crunching because he breaks his Wally's leg, and he is just laying it down hard. I mean, I actually for a minute thought that he was gonna kill him, but then he doesn't. He just leaves him sort of mangled, and when Barry finds him all just like messed up, and I was like, yo, you know, and Wallace West is like, you know, he's a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well, it was
didn't care. And
it was kind of a great homage to Jeff Johns again, because I don't know if you've read Jeff Johns' Teen Titans, but in the second or third issue of his entire run, spoilers for those of you who haven't read it, I guess, Jericho takes over Deathstroke's body in order to try to scare the Teen Titans into not being the Teen Titans. He doesn't think that kids should be in action, and he takes a shotgun and blasts Impulse's knee off. Like, so I thought personally, because I've seen a lot of I've seen him homage a lot of Jeff Johns. So to me, I thought that might have also been an homage there.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite possible. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about Impulse. And he came back a few issues ago, just right at the end of the Flash War. And yes, now he's on the new Young Justice team, but he also made an appearance in the annual too. Did you read the second annual for the Flash?
No, I haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, you haven't gotten to that yet? Yeah,
no,
definitely.
I know Impulse is like on the cover though.
Huh?
I know Impulse is like on the cover though, isn't he?
Yeah. Impulse actually plays a very like not a big part of the story, but he's in the story and stuff like that. And I actually really did enjoy the annual too. So like one of the things about it for when you do eventually read it is it actually does have sort of that Heroes in Crisis kind of tie-in kind of sort of deal. Like I don't know if you remember that conversation we had with Boom where it was, you know, that one scene we wanted to see in Heroes in Crisis where where Barry finds Wally's body and stuff like that. Like that's in there. Like that's in the annual.
Mm.
And I think that was a very good and interesting decision to actually include that, which is why I'm thinking why maybe it wasn't included in the actual main story, because it was set for the annual possibly, but it was really interesting, and I like seeing Impulse in there again. But that is one aspect about it. I wish Impulse would be utilized in the story just a little bit more. Again, I know he's in Young Justice now, but seeing him in the Flash storyline would be very interesting, and I'm hoping that at some point Williamson does, use him in one of the main stories instead of just like, one of the side annuals or something like that.
Impulse is a really testy topic, especially right now because, frankly, spoilers, I am in the middle of making a review for Young Justice #2, and I'm going to tear that book a new asshole. But partly because it doesn't make any sense. DC, again, is muddying waters between like Bendis and Williamson now because somehow in Young Justice, they have verbally said that Young Justice has existed. Bart knows everybody on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows him. Yet in the Flash,
nobody knows.
Nobody knows who he is. So where are we?
Yeah.
What are we doing with Impulse? Again, it feels like DC has no idea what they want to do for any of the Flash characters. Wally dead. Wallace goes from loving and admiring the Flash to like the Flash doing one small thing, and he's suddenly like, "Nah, man, like I don't fuck with you anymore." Yeet, bye. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. I would love to see Impulse do things in continuity and understand like how he knew the Young Justice team, how he got to where he is. But the sad thing is I don't think we're going to get it. I don't think we're going to know how he came to be with Young Justice, how this is somehow a second iteration of the team, even though
he shouldn't have existed before, yeah.
Connor Kent didn't exist before in the new 52, and I know like between Superman Reborn and other events in Rebirth, I know that there's been like some talk of how this universe is basically the pre-Flashpoint universe, but it's been manipulated slightly,
right,
through hyper time. Like everything exists and whatever, but they're not like they're picking and choosing when to elaborate on it, which is kind of annoying because I'd really like to know what the hell's going on. Because at times things didn't happen and they do happen. People are starting to get their memories back. I hope we see the fallout. Unfortunately, I think that because of whatever is causing Doomsday Clock to be delayed, they're now altering the story. Which I mean, I hope it doesn't, but I think it will end up changing the type of impact that Doomsday Clock is going to have on the DC universe. Because we were led to believe 2 years ago that Doomsday Clock was going to be the thing, right? Like this was going to be the fallout to the DC universe reboot special. And a lot of the plot threads being set up in the early arc of almost all of DC's books. So, including the Flash.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I could say is that Rebirth, over the course, since its introduction, I mean, I'm seeing it having, less and less and less of an impact as it's being kind of brought up less and less and less, which I think, again, with Doomsday Clock, which was supposed to be this big culmination of just, this is everything kind of deal. And then now they're just sort of like reworking it so that it kind of fizzles out so that it doesn't affect anything quite as much. Because, DC seems to be backtracking on Rebirth, which, I don't know why. I mean, yes, of course. I mean, I know we've had this conversation with Boom too, where they definitely are in more favor of, the more darker stories because that's what, I guess that's what sells and stuff like that. But, it is a little disappointing if that's the direction that Doomsday Clock itself does go to. I definitely don't want to, see it fizzle out into nothing where you just read that final issue and then it's just sort of, well, I guess all's well that ends well sort of story instead of that, big, more like mind-blowing, holy crap, this is where they were going with it sort of a scenario. So,
see, it's weird because we're like in an awkward situation where I want the creative teams to have the ability to tell the stories they want to tell. But right now they're giving every creator with a nickel to his name the room to do whatever they want. And when they decide to play with toys that aren't necessarily in their toy box, they start to, again, muddy the waters, right? Like I've said that quite a bit in this conversation. So between Impulse showing up after Flash War and Impulse and Young Justice, we don't know what's going on. You know, with Tim Drake, Tynan's Detective Comic run into Young Justice, he's suddenly Robin again. Via the Super Sons of Tomorrow story arc, we've established that Connor Kent hasn't really existed yet. Nobody really knows what happened to Cassie Kane, but we know that something's going to happen eventually. I think that editorial needs to keep things on lock. Like, if somebody's doing something with a character, you need to tell the other writer, you got to give it a second. Like, cool down, something's already happening. Because, frankly, it's confusing, especially for someone who reads a good majority of the books that they're publishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, too. I mean, it would be nice, you know, if there was just a little more cohesion between the writers and stuff like that. And I'm actually kind of wondering, too, is like sort of as I was getting through the more recent issues of Williamson's Flash run, if, you know, because I know he's not quite as big of a writer as, say, like Tom King or Brian Michael Bendis. I'm actually wondering if he's being dictated from the background a little bit, just because of, you know, some slight, you know, errors along, you know, continuity errors along the book line and stuff like that, where, you know, he has to kind of, in a little bit of ways, it seems like maybe he has to cater more towards what he's told to, like, say, Heroes in Crisis and stuff like that, which would explain a lot of the quick changes in personalities, like when, you know, Wally was taken to Sanctuary. I agree, Barry. I don't think he would have let Barry do that. I think he would have said, no, stay here and I'll help you, kind of deal. And but yeah, I mean, that's just, I will say, yeah, there definitely should probably be just a little more cohesion between the writers and stuff like that.
Well, the issue with that too is it's not like they are just trying to tell their story separate from everything else. Mm-hmm. Every couple months we have a crossover. So you are simultaneously doing different things with characters involved in both books and then crossing them over, which means they're taking place around the same time.
Yeah.
Which means that it doesn't make sense. You know, there's a big suspension of disbelief when you read comics. But man, like when it's just a suspension of logic and storytelling and a suspension in what can happen in a story, mm-hmm. There's a total disconnect there. Or at least there should be, right? They should not be one and the same. So I think it's collaborative. I don't think it's just like mandates because, you know, Williamson is one of the co-plotters on all this big Justice League stuff, which is another thing that's supposed to have massive impact on the DC multiverse. You know, it's him, Snyder, and Tynan. So I don't think Williamson's really being dragged around. I think he's trying to play game with everybody, and that he's just not making the right decisions, frankly. Because to be honest with you, I haven't liked anything Williamson's really written in a while. I didn't love Justice League Odyssey. That's another book that, like, a couple issues in, I was just like, man, you still haven't got me. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to wait till Dan Abnett hops on the book, because frankly, right now I have a little bit more confidence in Dan Abnett than I do Josh Williamson. I really like the guy. I've met him before. Really friendly, clearly very passionate. He's just not executing for me, whether it be Flash, Justice League Odyssey, you know, this Batman Flash tie-in crossover thing, which is unfortunate because he was like one of the guys that I discovered through DC Rebirth and was really championing him, you know. When Brian Hitch was massacring the Justice League Rebirth book, I was somebody that was saying, like, give it to Williamson. He did a great job on Justice League versus Suicide Squad. Just give it to Williamson. Mm-hmm. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know what I want Williamson to write or if I really want him to write anything that I want to read at all.
Yeah, okay, right on. So now we've talked about some negatives, some positives, you know, talked about the writer a little bit. So in the future, what would you like to see happen with the Flash book as well as Williamson and his writing?
I'd like Williamson to he's kind of doing what Scott Snyder's been doing on Justice League, and I've been preaching this a lot, is he's trying too hard to play out of the box, and he's grabbing too many things from out there, and he doesn't quite know what to do with it. I think he needs to become a little bit more concise. I don't think the characterization has been great so far. I think he often confuses Barry with Wally and Wally with some other thing that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, like at this point, I don't know. His run, right? He could theoretically, from this point on, do a great job at Flash, right? We're what, 65, 64 issues in. We'll argue that the first 25 were great. We've now had, 29 issues of mediocre Flash, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he were to finish out the rest of a 100-issue arc really well, that's not going to save his run for me. To be honest, I think he needs to take some time away from the Flash. I think he needs to maybe go work on some creator-owned stuff. I think he's trying too hard to really get into this mode of writing, for a pre-established universe, and it's just not working out super well for him. I like him as a writer, and it pains me to not like what he's writing. I want to like it because I loved the beginning of his Flash. I like his nail biter. I think that it's time for someone else. I think that that's one of the biggest problems with DC Rebirth. I think some creative teams ended too early, and I think some got way too much time on books. I think
Tom King Batman. What?
Yeah, right. I'm ready to get some new voices. Give me an up and comer on Flash. Give me someone new. Give me somebody with new ideas. I enjoyed Venditti. I know some Flash fans. I mean, old school comic book fans. I would say as a majority did not like the New 52. I liked the New 52 Flash. I enjoyed it.
I agree.
And even after going back and reading Jeff Johns and Mark Waid's Flash, I still think it holds up because I think it was different. It was creative. Mm-hmm. And it found a way to even kind of respect what came before it. Like even when Venditti was doing something totally different with Eobard Thawne, he also kind of came up with the explanation that Flashpoint. So like the Eobard Thawne you know and love still exists out there. This Eobard Thawne is the New 52 Eobard, mm-hmm. who is slightly different, but somehow all in the same. I think you give the Flash to someone else. I don't know if I want anybody established on it. Like I said, I would love to get somebody to really cut their teeth on it. I think that one of the best decisions Marvel has made in the last couple of years was getting guys like Donny Cates, a really fresh talent with a lot of creativity. Mm-hmm. Nobody really knew who he was. He came out with God Country. People started to like him. And then they put him on Venom, and he blew up. I think you need someone like that on Flash because there's a lot that you can do with him. You can play with the sci-fi. You can play with the spiritualism. It gives you a lot it gives you a lot to do. And it just feels like we're running around in circles with the Flash. Pardon my puns. I'd like to see something new. And this is a general issue that I've had with quite a few books lately. I'd like to find someone who can write good dialogue because the dialogue in Flash is not good. It doesn't feel like real people talking. Everybody just kind of speaks what they would be thinking. There's less internal monologue, and they just kind of outwardly say it. And again, it makes me. It feels like Silver Age and Golden Age storytelling. Like when Robin would be like, "Gee, Batman, that car is coming right toward us." It's happened. Like I was noticing that today when I was reading Williamson's Flash run. I'm like, dude, that's outdated. Like I don't know if you're trying to pay respect or if you're just kind of going on autopilot, but we don't do that anymore. And if you want to be the guy, right? You want to be the guy that's known as being out of the box and finding a way to tie in that old school storytelling. You're just not executing it right. So again, I think I'm just ready for a new voice. I'm ready for a new voice on the book. I think you give somebody a young writer with a lot to prove and with a love for the character and the mythos a shot to write the book.
Oh yeah, And now I'm actually wondering if, there have been other people that maybe have talked to Williamson about the whole dialogue thing too, because in the second annual, there's actually a line from Impulse where he's in a conflict with Godspeed, and Godspeed says something, and Impulse says, what is it? He's like, "Oh, I thought I was the only person who externally talked their inner monologue."
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of it's kind of funny you said that, because when I read that in the annual too, and some things I wouldn't mind seeing in the Flash is that lately, yeah, Williamson's been trying to go really big with his stories. I wouldn't mind if he kind of, simmered down a little bit and started to, if he's going to be on a little bit longer, kind of start to clutch his claws into some more simple stories, ones where Barry is working and solving crimes as a CSI, just to sort of like a little breather in between these bigger arcs that he's been doing, because it's really been like one after another after another after another, with just very few issues for like breathing room and stuff like that. So that's something I would definitely like to see, is just maybe a little more simplicity, and then through that maybe he could even sort of relax himself and start to think of some more broader ideas that, might be a little better for the future on the line. But I mean, as far as the overall thing goes, is I'm still digging the Flash. I'm still liking it. It could be a little bias in there just because he is my favorite superhero. But at the same time, I can definitely see and understand your points and stuff like that. And it's going to be very interesting to see where the book is going to go here in the next, within this next year, I should say, because I know that basically the next, almost the entire 2019 era is going to be based around who was in that prison cell in the future that broke out, because the last issue that I read, the 40. Was it the 42? Not the price, but the one just before that.
Oh, that was like 63.
Or sorry, 63?
62.
62, yeah. Because 63 starts the price, right? That's part 2 of the price.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so like at the very end of the 62, it's just like you see kind of the shadow that the Godspeed, the person that he's serving, and he's got the lightning around him and stuff like that, and sort of like the Flash is gonna and then the little panel, it's like the Flash storyline 2019. So I know that we know that this is gonna be cover pretty much the entire year, and I'm sort of interesting to see, because like part of me is just kind of like, is it like Cobalt Blue? Is it Future Flash? Is it?
I'm also really worried though, because again, with him not tying up plot lines, Zoom is still out there. Like Hunter Zolomon is still out there, and like they've dropped him already. What was it? Right before the Force Quest arc, he was on another in another universe, messing with another Flash. I think that Williamson just has too much going on.
Well, I mean, even though he hasn't really made another like large appearance, like he's still in there. He's kind of like right now, Williamson sort of, from what I'm seeing and stuff, he has him looming in the background, because at the end of the Force Quest there, they did tell you that it was Hunter Zolomon that massacred Gorilla City, and that he's the one that wiped almost all of them out. And that he has been following Barry's footsteps for a few issues in the background. Even though it's not he's not in your face about it, but he's still there. And I don't think that his story is quite done, wrapped up. I think he's gonna have a bigger part to play over the course of this year, because I think from what I'm seeing, Williamson is going to try to do is eventually it looks like there's going to be just this big blowout war between all of the different forces, and then you have the character in the prison cell, Hunter Zolomon, Barry, and all the other speedsters, and maybe there's going to be some kind of big team up, I don't know, to stop the other forces. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
What do they call this one? World War Flash?
World War Flash. Yeah,
God,
that
it's so
could be interesting, as long as they don't try to do like like a brightest day or blackest night thing, where it's just like, Speed Force or something. I don't know.
I think that the fact that at the end of Flash, where we've acknowledged that Zolomon is on the loose and nobody's looking for him, is kind of a character assassination for Barry. Like throughout this run so far, Barry's just kind of been okay with things happening. Like he's simultaneous. He like first of all, when you first meet Gemini, he's like, oh well, like fuck him because like I got to go back to doing the Force Quest.
Yeah,
but like, what did it take for him to actually start the Force Quest? Because he was already Barry just ignores things. Like he's just like, well, I didn't want to get outside my comfort zone of Central City, and I don't know how to do anything anywhere else. Like, dude, you're the Flash. Like, he feels incapable. And then in terms of, like, that, he also negligent. Like, he's constantly ignoring something else to go do, Like, Hunter Zolomon is a serial killer. And he's on the loose. Why aren't you looking for him? It doesn't make any sense. Like, I think logically, you could have, at the end of Flash War, had Barry and Wally, even if this is tropey, at least it would account for it, have Barry and Wally think that Hunter Zolomon is incapacitated and Zolomon tricks them and he's actually not. And he's on the loose preparing himself for whatever he's been doing and stalking Barry and whatnot. But the fact that, like, Barry and Wally just kind of let Hunter Zolomon go do his thing out in the world, it's negligent. It's like you're assassinating Barry as a hero because he's just letting a serial killer run wild. Not to mention a very threatening serial killer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's very true too with Hunter Zolomon just being really interesting, because at first I thought what was gonna end up happening was that since Zoom is basically Wally West's Eobard Thawne, that's his Reverse Flash. I thought that Wally was, wasn't going to go to the Sanctuary or whatever. I thought he was going to be the one to like, okay, maybe I should just set aside looking for my family for now and start going after Hunter Zolomon because I know what he's capable of, and also playing up the whole aspect that they used to be friends sort of deal. When just before he became Zoom. So I thought they were going to do something with that, but then they kind of didn't, which was depressing. And now they kind of like, sort of brought him into being another Reverse Flash for Barry for right now until, hopefully Wally West's return. God, I hope that happens because I really love to see.
See? This might just be Dan DiDio, but like, man, DC does not know what to do with their legacy characters. It's either that or they're just letting Dan DiDio have his way, because I know he doesn't really love the legacy characters.
Not at all.
Nightwing is pretty much dead. For all says it right, it's Rick Grayson. Wally West is dead. Mm-hmm. Roy Harper, dead. They just need to come up with a concise direction for these characters. And they can't have different writers taking these characters in different directions at the same time.
I would definitely agree to that. And I will say, Dan DiDio, I mean, some people say he's, it's all his decision. Some say he's still at the, mercy of someone above him because, it's really hard to tell. But yeah, I mean, I know that Dan DiDio definitely doesn't care for, as you said, legacy characters. And it is, this last year of DC overall has been like, with 2018 has been a little more on the frustrating side. Because it's just like, why are you just letting this happen? It's like you get rid of. I mean, and first off, like the thing about the whole not to get off the topic of the Flash, but the whole Dick Grayson to Rick Grayson thing, I thought was the dumbest reason in the world. Where Dan DiDio said, "Oh, Batman shouldn't have Nightwing because it makes him seem old," and I'm like, "What the? Are you serious?" Like,
I don't think they realize that like people have been screaming for characters to get old and mature for so long, like as evident by the reaction from like One More Day with Spider-Man, right? As soon as they took away Mary Jane and the marriage and everything, people went nuts.
Oh yeah, I know. People went ape shit for that, and obviously there's reasons to. I mean, right now in Superman, like even though I'm not reading Superman because I don't like Bendis's take on it. I'm waiting for Lois Lane and Clark Kent to get a divorce.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like I feel like that's where he's going.
the thing was, like, we didn't get Rebirth for long enough to get another New 52. Like, I don't think we're gonna get a reboot, but like in terms of the relationships, like everybody just like in rocky standings with each other, and wasn't the whole point of Rebirth to like reconcile?
Yeah, that's basically what the point was, and I know for and that's kind of again, it's sort of like it's frustrating. It's really frustrating, because it's like DC saying, okay, we've listened to our fans, we know what you want here. Here's what you wanted, and then once they see that positivity back up, they're like, okay, cool, we're just gonna take that back now, and here's that thing you didn't like before.
I don't know. I mean, they're constantly like looking for any publicity they can get, and it's frustrating. And I honestly, like, the state of DC. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty upset. I'm like, because I loved Rebirth, everything about it. I was buying almost everything DC was putting out. The directions were great, and I knew it wasn't going to be permanent. But goddamn, man, we got a little bit less than 2 years of good stories out of it, and it just started diving downhill. Just because like you have all these superstar writers, you cannot let them all do their big multiverse shattering, drama at the same time.
Absolutely,
we should not have a universe where Bendis is changing everything with Superman, and Tom King has Heroes in Crisis, and Doomsday Clock, and the results of Metal leading into Justice League.
Yeah, dude, you hit the nail on the head there, and like, it's crazy. It sucks. I mean, in that regard, it does suck because it's like every character, every book is being pulled every which way it can because everybody wants to, everyone wants their book to be like the next Blackest Night. They want their book to be the next, Crisis on Infinite Earths or Infinite Crisis. They want their thing to be the biggest, best ever. And, and I miss the days. When events were just, focused. It was just one large one, and it didn't really impact the other books all that much. Every writer was still writing their books. The event was just its own thing. Maybe a couple tie-ins just to adjust any changes, but, but yeah, it's just, it is a little, I guess the word I could use, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's just exhausting because it's just like, you get like, for example, when it came to Metal, like it was I think it was like the exact same day or something like that the last issue came out. Then Doomsday Clock started. It was like
Doomsday Clock. Doomsday Clock started basically the same week that issue 6 came out of Metal. Issue 4 of Doomsday Clock.
Yeah.
But
so
like,
it was
they
like almost.
They had already prefaced that like Doomsday Clock happened after Metal. Like,
yeah.
We knew that much, but like the current state of the DC, we don't know what is occurring where, and like DC is using that as a tactic to actively be like, well, you can't tell us that we're fucking up continuity because you don't know where this is taking place. So everything's square, right? Like, we'll have our Rick Grayson, we'll have our dead Wally West, we'll have Batman be a fucking robot, Lois Lane be an absentee mother, because you don't know when it's happening. So
also freaking castrating Superman, like, oh hey, I'm your dad and I'm taking your wife and your son. Thumbs up.
So frustrating, because DC has some serious talent on books.
Yes.
And like,
they're
just not doing well. Like, if you had told me 4 or 5 years ago when I started reading comics that Scott Snyder would be writing a Justice League book and I didn't like it, I would have called you fucking crazy, dude. when they announced him on Justice League, I almost lost my mind, man. I was so excited. Like for as much as I shit on Justice League and will pick out all of the problems in it, I wanted it so bad. Like I wanted Scott Snyder Justice League so bad. And now that I have it, it's just not good. And like Tom King, great writer. Excellent writer. I despise his Batman run, but he is an excellent writer. I will never take that away from him.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me Tom King was picking up after Scott Snyder, I was like, that's awesome. That's such a good choice. Such a good choice. And then he did it, and he's doing his thing, and I hate it. Or like when they said Bendis was coming over, a lot of people were like, were really off the Bendis train because he had been doing a lot of like okay and mediocre stuff for the last couple of years. And I was like, guy's a legend. Like the guy's written some of my favorite Marvel stuff of all time. He's written one of my favorite Daredevil runs of all time. He's going to be great. I have faith in him. I'm really excited. I'm going to give him a chance.
Yeah, I didn't really. Not on Superman. Like I heard he was coming over to Superman. I was just like, not the right book for him.
And then he just flopped. I don't think anything is the right book for him because, frankly, everybody was like, oh, Young Justice is going to be perfect. He knows how to write young voices. Honestly, come issue 2, I'm ready to drop the book.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done. I'm checked out of it. And that was supposed to be the book that he was supposed to do the best on, right? Like, everybody's saying, give him a young teenage book. Give him a Teen Titans or a Young Justice. He got it. What is he doing? It's upsetting, because I definitely come off in my videos like a pessimist. But honestly, a lot of these writers and a lot of these creative teams that are on books, I have either liked at some point or been optimistic about them and their writing and what they're going to be doing and taking these characters and where they're going to be taking these characters. And then they let me down hardcore. I'm not building up a mountain for them. I am giving them the benefit of the doubt. I gave Bendis' Superman like 9 or 10 issues before I dropped it. I gave Tom King's like 60 issues before I dropped it. And now I'm kind of at the point in my comic book reading and dissecting career, I suppose, where like if your book doesn't get me in 2 or 3 issues, I'm done because you're not doing your job right. It's as frank as that, The best stories I read get me on issue 1. Tomasi's Detective Comics, issue 1. I was right there. Venditti's Hawkman, issue 1. I'm there. Even Green Lantern's, Grant Morrison's Green Lantern, issue 1. I was like, I'm with it from the get-go. Like I don't, you know what I mean? And that's just telling. You have to understand what medium that you're working in, and it's definitely encouraged to draw outside the lines and do something unique, but at the same time, you have to know the limitations of the medium that you're working with. You cannot write a prose novel in a comic book. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're writing a comic book. You are writing sequential art with narrative. And I don't know. It's definitely frustrating that people aren't picking up on that, for sure.
Oh yeah, and again, yeah, it does get a little frustrating. It gets a little tiring, but we still hang in there. We still continue to go back every month or bi-weekly for a lot of books, and we get it because we're still hopeful that it's gonna turn out okay in the end. And every company, it has its dark times. I mean, just a few years ago, it was Marvel that was taking the brunt end of just about all the hate and stuff. And, now DC's getting it, is pretty much getting it. But
the problem is that the companies know that a lot of comic fans are readily there, still buying books. Like, that's why I've been a big proponent of dropping books when you don't like them, because your money is your voice. If you want a book to continue, buy the floppies. If you don't like a book, don't buy it. Because frankly, like, as, again, clearly a Batman guy, right? I want to have a complete Batman collection, but frankly, I know a couple of years from now I'm going to find these issues in quarter bins or dollar bins, and I won't have to contribute really to a book that I don't like. That's why I dropped it. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I want a full collection. Like, I don't want a gap. Odds are, if they're not doing anything great in their books, you're going to find them for cheaper than what you pay for them now anyways. You know what I mean?
True.
If I really want Tom King's entire Batman run, I'll go back and find them in quarter bins and pay less than what I'd be paying now to support a book that I don't like. You know, that's why, like, I know, like, every time we talk about Heroes in Crisis, you're like, man, I fucking hate it. And every time I'm like, bro, just drop the book. Just drop it. If you don't like it, just drop it.
I know. It's so hard. It's so hard because it's like I feel like I'm already mentally conditioned to get the next issue.
You know, like, and again, you know, I'm fortunate enough now to get, like, those preview copies from DC. But, like, even before then, like, there were just books that I don't even, not only do I not want to waste my money on, I just don't want to waste my time reading. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you just had a daughter. Like, you're a busy guy too. And I know, speaking for, I guess, some of the busy people out in the world, I don't want to waste my time, my free time, doing things that I don't like or absorbing something that I don't like.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm just like, I'm not going to give it my attention, and I'm certainly not going to give it my money. Because the more and more you wait and you hold out for a book to be good, the more and more the company's going to be like, well, you're still buying it, so you must like it, right? Or whether or not you like it or not, you're still paying us. So we're just going to let it go the way it is. So, you know, for me, for example, I'm giving Scott Snyder until the end of this next arc, and if it doesn't impress me, I'm dropping that too. You know, and to be honest, I would either rather save that money or take that money and put it towards a book that deserves the support, you know? Like
Absolutely.
small, like books like Hawkman, knocking it out of the park. Nobody's reading it, knocking it out of the park. Or American Carnage, a Vertigo book by Brian Edward Hill. Absolutely killing it. It's a Vertigo book, so you know it's not going to sell crazy copies, but you know what? It's great and deserves to be recognized and deserves to be supported. Rather put my money towards that or towards, you know, indie books, you know, that don't get a lot of appreciation and that are oftentimes, you know, let me make this more concise. Most of the time, when you look at big time comic book critics, 80% of the books that are getting awards are independent titles.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real. It's the sagas and the criminals and, you know, the God countries that people are like, wow, like this is next level storytelling. And that's coming from a guy who spends a very, very large portion of his life and his finances to read superhero comics and the big two. So, you know, I don't know. That's just my rant on just, you know, if you don't like a book, stop buying. Like I said, honestly, I'm probably going to drop Flash soon. I'm not impressed. I don't need a Flash year one. I don't need it,
Right.
especially not from Williamson. That's the thing too. I don't like how after like Frank Miller's Batman year one, everybody feels like they need a year one. Because to be frank, I don't need your year one. The reason year one is so special is because it was original for its time. Same reason why I don't need an old lady Harley. You know what I mean?
Oh my god! Don't get me started on Old Lady Harley. This video would go on for like 4 hours.
Like I had my old man Logan, and frankly, like Dark Knight Returns was basically my old man Batman.
Yeah.
I had him already. I don't need someone else's.
You don't need to relive it through another character.
Right, and honestly, you know, tying that a long-winded way of tying that back into the conversation. That's part of why I'm just not messing with this Flash run anymore, because it's derivative of Jeff Johns, both his Flash and his Green Lantern. I've had my Green Lantern Corps War or my Sinestro Corps War, you know, or the War of the Lights. I don't need the War of the Forces. You know, I've seen it. I don't need to see it with another character. You know, as you know, as big as someone's trying to make it, I'd rather see something totally different and have it flop and be bad than have somebody try to copy something I love and have it be bad. because at least you're creatively taking a step in your own direction. You know what I mean? And it's just, it feels derivative. And again, like I know I've been bogging down on Josh Williamson a lot. I like the guy. Personally, I really like the guy, and I want him to do well. And at one point, I wanted him to write Justice League. But he's just, the Flash run, just to kind of summarize what I've been saying, it feels like he's trying to do too much of everything that's come before. He's trying to evoke that old school storytelling. It's outdated. The way that the narrative flows, the way that he's trying to do dialogue between the characters, he's doing the, gee whiz, Batman, insert obvious thing that's happening right here, then what is the artist for? Why do we have the visual artist if you're going to tell me everything that's in front of me, or you're going to keep prodding me to tell me like what is happening right then and there. I can see it. I'm aware of what's happening. Like, stop wasting space on the panel with dialogue boxes that I don't need. Be more tasteful about it. And that's my issue with Flash, is that it has some things that could be good, but it's not very tasteful. The storytelling's kind of tropey. It's very much, this thing happens because the plot demands it, but we don't really know why. And then, like you were saying earlier, yeah, you get the occasional 1 second mention, but most of the time it's not enough. You can't write off an entire story arc with one sentence. And one thing that I have to say, that's just, I guess it's a nitpick. Whenever Williamson tries to use science, it's wrong.
Oh.
It's totally wrong. Like, I remember specifically, I got really triggered because Iris was writing a note. And, obviously you're going to bend physics, right? Like, it's comic books. But, if you define physics wrong, that's totally different. If you're going to bend it, then bend it. For example, Iris was doing research that said velocity equals speed. Velocity does not equal speed, personally. Mathematically, velocity does not equal speed.
Right.
Is the absolute value of velocity, which is totally different. Metabolism, and then in the arc right before the Force Quest, they were saying, "Oh, Flash woke up because of his metabolism." They didn't use a sedative or a poison that would go through his metabolism. His metabolism has nothing to do with his sleep cycle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're going to straight up mention something physics related, you can define it and then bend it or break it even, but don't misdefine it. You know what I mean?
Don't call it something it's not.
Right. Exactly. Because again, I know people, are going to watch and be like, "Oh, this jackass thinks that physics exists entirely 100% correct." And, I get it. The Speed Force doesn't exist. Obviously that breaks physics immediately. The idea of the Flash breaks physics immediately. But you don't have to misdefine physics to break physics.
Right.
They're there and then work outside of that. I hope that he can consolidate what he's doing and make it more concise. I hope that we can establish who Barry is and who the cast characters are and what their relationships are, because frankly, they don't, to put it generally, they don't feel right. They don't feel like those characters. He's writing characters for story and not writing story for characters. I'm not really willing to spend, especially because it's bi-monthly, $8 a month, sometimes more, on a book that I have, if I can pick out a problem, page by page, that's an issue. Issue, get it, comic books.
Yeah, comic issue.
But yeah, all in all, it started out great. I'm not loving it. I think it's getting really inconsistent, frankly, sometimes childish, uncontrolled. I would, moving forward, I would love, honestly, for a new voice to be in the book. Again, you get somebody who's proven themselves in the independent sphere, for them to cut their teeth, that really have something to prove, that have a background knowledge of the character, and you let them do it. You just let them do it. Because that's how you get the Donny Cates and the Jeff Johns and the Scott Snyders. You know what I mean? So, why not let somebody do that with Flash?
Yeah. And that is, I think that's a very good and fair point to make. I think, the way you explained it definitely works out and makes sense. And I would have to agree on that. There definitely I would like to see some changes on the books to to those degrees. And I mean, just we'll see. I guess at the end of the day, just to kind of start the closeout, it's we'll see what happens. Hopefully, it evens out for you. I mean, me again, I'm still with its problems, still enjoying it, still liking it. Uh, but I can see your point. So, uh, with that, I guess we're going to go ahead and bring this video to a close. And again, I would like to thank you, Dark Knight Nation, for coming over here. And definitely go check out his channel because his videos are freaking awesome. You will definitely have a good time with them. I promise you. So I'm going to let you, if you got any last minute closings to get out, go for it.
And, well, firstly, thanks so much for having me on and letting me scream about things that don't exist like an old man. All in all, I hope I don't come off as like a mega pessimist, but I truly I want these books to be good.
Just a little bit.
I really want to love these books, and I want these characters to be kind of fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
I want more runs at the Jeff Johns caliber. But again, man, I appreciate you having me on and wanting to have this conversation because I know that sometimes people don't want to hear adverse opinions, and I know that at times you and I will disagree on things. You like the current Flash run, I don't, but I like that we can have a conversation and just kind of be polite and have that level of discourse, which I think a lot of people lack, not only in this community but in pretty much any community that you'll find out in the world. So, big kudos to you, man, for just fucking letting me be an asshole about the Flash. For those of you watching, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe down below to Joe's Geek Show, man. He's been putting in a lot of work on his channel, trying to make great content for you guys, and he's totally making that happen, and he's getting better and better with every video, knocking it out of the fucking park. So make sure, first and foremost, you go subscribe to him, and then if you have a little bit of energy left over, I'm sure you'll find the link to my channel in the description as well. I like to be a yelly old man about comic books and sometimes dissect them. So, I'm sure you and I will be meeting with one another soon to have more conversations of this sort. Hopefully I get to be more optimistic.
Absolutely. Definitely I look forward to having you on again and maybe sometime maybe me over on your channel where we can definitely talk about something a little more positive in the comic book world. And don't you worry, not only we'll make sure to have links and cards, tags. Don't worry, we'll get them over to you when we can. And with that, I want to say thank you everybody for watching. And hey, if you liked this video, again, we just said it, but like, share, and subscribe for more content. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. And as always, you can look in the links in the description down below to get access to my Facebook, my website, my Twitter, and much more. Alright, everyone, take care. And, oh, and one more thing I just want to add real quick. If you are reading the current Flash, tell us what you think down below. Because we would definitely love to hear your thoughts and opinions on that. Alright, everyone. As always, stay geeky.
Have a good one, guys. Thanks.